abandoned and scorned until a human's hand stirred forbidden desire. Shadows of solitude, the violet light of distant stars filtered through the crystalline dome of Naira's observatory. Her delicate fingers adjusted the calibration on her atmospheric scanner as she recorded the day's readings in her journal. 6 years of exile had taught her the value of routine. It kept her mind focused, prevented it from wandering back to Lysaria, to the family and colleagues who had turned their backs on her. Atmospheric pressure stable, radiation levels consistent with previous measurements, she murmured to herself, her voice the only sound aside from the gentle hum of her equipment. The solitude had become both comfort and prison. Naira glanced at her reflection in a darkened monitor, her purple skin luminescent in the low light, her silver-flecked eyes still bright despite years of isolation. The traditional markings along her temples, once symbols of her high scientific status, now served only as reminders of what she had lost. The proximity alarm shattered her contemplation. Rushing to the observation deck, she watched a small craft hurtle through the thin atmosphere, trailing smoke and debris. It disappeared behind the northern ridge, the impact sending tremors through the rocky ground beneath her sanctuary. Visitors. How inconvenient, she whispered, though her heart raced with something that wasn't entirely dread. After years of solitude, even potential danger offered a break in monotony. Gathering her emergency pack and protective gear, Naira ventured outside. The twin moons cast long shadows across the barren landscape as she navigated familiar paths toward the crash site. The acrid scent of burned metal guided her to where the small vessel had carved a path through the red soil. A figure stumbled from the wreckage, coughing and disoriented, human male bleeding from a gash above his eye. He wore the insignia of the Galactic Cartography Guild, an explorer rather than a hunter or soldier. Some of her tension eased. "Are you?" he began, then stopped abruptly when he fully registered her appearance. "You're Lysarian," he said, recognition and something like wonder in his voice. "And you're trespassing," Naira replied, maintaining her distance. "This moon is unregistered territory." The human straightened, wincing at what appeared to be injured ribs. "Dash Merrick, lead cartographer aboard the Wayfinder. Sorry about dropping in unannounced. Ion storm damaged my navigation system." He attempted a smile that quickly turned to a grimace of pain. Despite her better judgment, Naira approached, scanning him with her medical device. 3 fractured ribs, mild concussion, various lacerations. Nothing fatal, but you'll need treatment. "I appreciate the diagnosis, but I didn't catch your name," he said, leaning against the hull of his ship for support. She hesitated. Names held power in Lysarian culture. Sharing hers was an intimacy she hadn't extended to anyone in years. "Naira," she finally offered. "Naira Valsoren." "Well, Naira Valsoren, I don't suppose you know somewhere I could make repairs?" "I promise I won't stay any longer than necessary." Something in his earnest expression, so different from the guarded suspicion she'd grown accustomed to, made her decision easier than expected. "My research station is 2 kilometers east. It has a workshop that might suffice." She turned and began walking, not waiting to see if he followed. "But understand this, I've chosen isolation for a reason. Don't mistake necessity for hospitality." Behind her, she heard Dash gathering what he could salvage from his vessel, before falling into step behind her. His presence altered the air around her, charged it with a forgotten energy. It had been so long since she had spoken to another being that even this simple interaction left her feeling strangely breathless. As they approached her dome-shaped sanctuary, Naira felt an unfamiliar sensation, a peculiar awareness of herself through a stranger's eyes. She straightened her posture, suddenly conscious of how wild and untamed she must appear after years alone on this desolate moon. "Impressive setup for someone seeking isolation," Dash commented, taking in her sophisticated equipment. "Exile and isolation aren't synonymous," she replied. "One is imposed, the other chosen." His eyes met hers with unexpected understanding. "Sometimes they're the same thing." Tentative trust. "The power coupling is completely fried," Dash muttered, examining the damaged component from his ship spread across Naira's workbench. 3 days had passed since the crash, and though his injuries were healing well under her careful ministrations, his vessel remained stubbornly grounded. Naira observed from a careful distance, analyzing his movements with scientific precision. Humans were rare in this sector. She'd studied their physiology in academic texts but never expected to encounter one in her exile. His resilience impressed her. Despite obvious pain, he worked tirelessly on repairs. Your technology is primitive, she noted, moving closer to examine the coupling, but adaptable. I might have compatible materials in my storage bay. Dash glanced up, a smudge of grease accentuating the curve of his cheek. Primitive? The Wayfinder is top-of-the-line guild equipment. By human standards, perhaps. A ghost of amusement curved her lips, an expression so foreign it almost startled her. How long since she'd felt anything resembling humor? In the storage bay, Naira climbed a ladder to reach upper shelves. As she stretched for a container, her foot slipped. Dash moved with surprising speed, catching her before she fell. The sudden contact, his hands firm around her waist. Her body pressed momentarily against his chest, sent a shock through her system. "I've got you," he said, his voice unexpectedly soft. Naira quickly regained her footing and stepped away, her skin tingling where he touched her. "Thank you," she managed, the words stiff and formal. Lysarians have sensitive nerve endings. Physical contact can be overwhelming. "Sorry, I didn't mean to. It's fine. A cultural difference, nothing more." She handed him the container, careful to avoid brushing fingers. "These components should be compatible with your systems." Later that evening, as twin moons cast their glow through the dome, Dash joined her in the small dining area. She'd prepared a simple meal, synthesized proteins modified for human consumption. "May I ask why you're here?" "Alone?" Dash inquired, breaking the silence. "Most Lysarians I've encountered stay close to their collective." Naira stared into her cup, debating how much to reveal. "I question things that shouldn't be questioned. Propose theories that threatened established beliefs." "About what?" Her silver-flecked eyes met his. "Interspecies emotional capacity, particularly regarding non-telepathic species like humans." She paused. "My people believe emotional connections require telepathic resonance." "I suggested otherwise. And they exiled you for that?" Disbelief colored his voice. "They exiled me for pursuing forbidden research and contaminating myself in the process." The bitterness in her tone surprised even her. 6 years. Time enough to reconstruct my research, but not to understand why simple curiosity warranted such punishment. Dash considered her words. "Sometimes people fear what challenges their worldview." He hesitated, then added, "Would continuing your research interest you? I could provide human perspective data." Something sparked in Naira. Scientific curiosity, yes, but something else too. "Something dangerous." "Perhaps," she replied carefully. "It would be valuable information." That night, unable to sleep, Naira found Dash on the observation deck, gazing at unfamiliar constellations. "Your stars are different," he said without turning. "Everything is different when you're far from home," she replied, standing beside him. When he finally looked at her, moonlight illuminated his features, emphasizing the alien nature of his expressions, so open, so unguarded. Among her people, such transparency would be considered a weakness. Yet somehow it drew her closer. "Tomorrow I'll help you reconfigure the navigation system," she said, her voice softer than intended. "With modifications, you should be able to navigate back to mapped space." "Thank you." His hand rested on the railing inches from hers, close but not touching. "For everything." The space between their hands seemed charged with unspoken possibilities, a gravitational pull she was increasingly unable to ignore. Unveiled secrets. "Your heart rate increases when I'm near," Naira observed one morning 2 weeks into Dash's stay. They worked side by side in her laboratory, the ship repairs temporarily abandoned in favor of her research. Dash looked up from the sensor pads attached to his wrist and temple. "That's what your experiment is measuring?" Among other physiological responses. She recorded the data, pretending not to notice the flush creeping up his neck. "Lysarians can sense these changes naturally through our empathic abilities, though they're limited with non-telepathic species." "And what exactly does my increased heart rate tell you?" Dash asked, his voice deliberately casual. Naira hesitated. "That you're either experiencing stress," she met his gaze, "or attraction." The silence between them hummed with tension. "Which do your readings suggest?" he finally asked. Instead of answering, she removed the sensors from his skin, her fingers lingering longer than necessary. Science requires objective distance, she murmured, more to herself than to him. I'm losing that objectivity. Dash captured her hand before she could withdraw completely. Maybe that's not a bad thing. That evening, as a rare storm battered the dome, Naira finally shared the full truth of her exile. My research wasn't merely theoretical, she admitted, watching lightning fracture the purple sky. I experienced it firsthand during a diplomatic mission. A human embassy translator, we formed a connection that defied Lysarian understanding. What happened? Dash asked softly. When discovered I was declared contaminated, he was reassigned. The official record states I pursued dangerous xenophilic tendencies that threatened our genetic purity. Her laugh was hollow. 6 years later, and I'm still considered a cautionary tale in Lysarian scientific circles. That's why you recognize the guild insignia immediately, Dash realized. You were looking for him. No, she countered quickly. I gave up that hope long ago, but seeing another human, she trailed off. Reopened old wounds. Naira shook her head. Created new questions. The storm intensified, rattling the dome's structure. A power surge plunged them into darkness, emergency lights casting everything in soft blue glow. The backup generator will activate soon, Naira said, rising to check the systems. As she moved past Dash, another surge shook the station, throwing her off balance. Their bodies collided, and this time neither pulled away immediately. In the dim light, Naira felt the rapid beat of his heart against her palm where it rested on his chest. Her empathic senses, usually muted with non-Lysarians, flared unexpectedly, flooding her with his emotions, curiosity, desire, and something deeper she dared not name. Your research conclusion, Dash whispered, his breath warm against her face. What was it? That emotional resonance transcends telepathic capability, she answered, her voice barely audible above the storm. That connection between species isn't just possible, it's inevitable under the right conditions. And these conditions? His hand tentatively traced the markings along her temple, sending shivers across her skin. Proximity. Time. Her eyes drifted closed at his touch. Mutual curiosity. The warning alarm interrupted the moment, a perimeter breach. Naira pulled away instantly, activating the security screen. Her blood froze at the image displayed. A Lysarian patrol vessel, she whispered, fear evident in her voice. They never venture this far into uncharted space. Dash's expression hardened. Unless they're looking for something. Or someone. Their eyes met in silent understanding. Whatever fragile connection they'd begun to explore now faced its first real threat, and the consequences could prove deadly for them both. Cosmic collision. They can't have tracked me here, Naira whispered, frantically gathering her research data. This outpost isn't on any Lysarian charts. Dash peered at the security monitor. The sleek silver vessel had landed less than a kilometer away, its distinctive crescent shape unmistakably Lysarian. Could they be tracking your equipment? Some kind of long-range scanner? Possible. She transferred files to a portable drive with trembling fingers. Or their expanding territorial claims. Either way, if they find me, find us. She didn't finish the thought. What happens if they discover you? Her silver-flecked eyes met his. Best case? Permanent exile to a monitored facility. Worst case? Mind wipe to remove contaminated thoughts. She swallowed. And for you, indefinite detention for unauthorized contact with a restricted individual. Then we need to leave, now. Dash moved with purposeful efficiency, gathering essential supplies. My ship isn't fully repaired, but it'll fly, probably. Naira hesitated, glancing around her sanctuary. 6 years of solitary research, of rebuilding her life, abandoned in minutes. I can't just— You can, Dash said firmly. Unless you want to test your government's forgiveness? The station's proximity alarm blared again. 3 figures emerged from the Lysarian vessel, environmental suits obscuring their features as they traversed the rocky terrain toward the dome. They're coming. Panic edged her voice. There's a maintenance tunnel leading to the rear exit. We can reach your ship from there. They moved swiftly through the narrow passage, the sound of the approaching patrol spurring them forward. Behind them, the distinct hum of a Lysarian scanner penetrated the dome's walls. They're doing a biological sweep, Naira whispered. Looking for Lysarian life signs. Will they find yours? Eventually. She pressed her hand against a hidden panel revealing the exit. We have minutes at most. Outside, wind whipped across the barren landscape as they sprinted toward the ridge where Dash's ship remained partially camouflaged beneath emergency thermal sheeting. The damaged vessel looked impossibly fragile against the vast emptiness surrounding them. "It's not pretty," Dash admitted as they reached the ship, "but it'll get us to the jump point." A shout echoed across the distance. One of the patrol had spotted them. "Get in," Dash urged, helping Nira aboard before sliding into the pilot's seat. His hands flew across the controls, bringing systems online with desperate speed. The engines sputtered, then caught. Nira strapped herself in, watching the approaching figures through the view screen. One raised what appeared to be a restraint projector. "Dash," she warned. The ship lurched upward just as an energy pulse grazed their hull. Alarms blared throughout the cockpit as Dash fought to maintain control, the vessel shuddering violently as they ascended. "Navigation's compromised," he shouted over the noise. "I need coordinates anywhere away from here." Nira accessed the system, entering calculations with practiced precision. "There's a nebula in Sector 7. Its radiation will mask our signature." The ship broke atmosphere, accelerating away from the moon as the patrol vessel gave chase. Dash's piloting skills, impressive even with damaged controls, kept them just ahead of their pursuers. "They're gaining," Nira reported, watching the scanner. "Their weapons are charging." Dash met her gaze briefly. "I need to try something incredibly stupid." Before she could respond, he cut engines completely, allowing their momentum to carry them forward as he executed a controlled roll that positioned them behind the patrol vessel. The maneuver, beautiful in its recklessness, gave them precious seconds to jump to light speed before the Lysarians could react. Stars stretched into streaks of light as they escaped. The sudden silence in the cockpit broken only by their ragged breathing. The reality of what they'd done, what they'd lost, settled over them like a shroud. When Nira finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I've never defied them so directly before. There's no going back now." Dash's hand found hers in the dim light, his fingers intertwining with hers. This time she didn't pull away. The contact sent waves of emotion through her heightened senses. His concern, his determination, and something deeper that mirrored her own forbidden feelings. "Are you afraid?" he asked softly. "Yes," she admitted, "but not of them." Her gaze met his in the starlight. "Of this." The ship drifted into the nebula's protective embrace, suspended in clouds of luminescent cosmic dust. Outside, stars and gases swirled in eternal dance. Inside, two beings from different worlds moved toward each other, gravity and desire inseparable. Their first kiss was tentative, a crossing of boundaries both physical and cultural. Her purple skin glowed faintly with emotional response, a biological reaction she couldn't hide. His hands traced the contours of her face with gentle curiosity, mapping differences and similarities. "Your research was correct," Dash whispered against her lips. "This connection, it transcends species." What followed was exploration of the most intimate kind, a discovery of how their bodies could communicate when language failed. Her hypersensitive skin responded to his every touch with cascades of sensation that her people had taught her to suppress, but never explained why. His human warmth contrasted with her cooler temperature, creating a perfect balance of sensation. In the ship's small cabin, surrounded by the swirling colors of the nebula, they created their own universe, one where the laws of her people and the prejudices of his held no power. Each caress defied scientific expectation. Each shared breath challenged political boundaries. Later, as they lay entwined, Nira realized that her years of research had never prepared her for this, the profound vulnerability of being truly known by another being. Science had given her questions, but Dash had given her answers she hadn't known she was seeking. "What happens now?" she asked, her head resting against his chest. Dash's fingers traced patterns along her shoulder. "We run, we hide, or we fight back. Challenge the system that separated you from your people." His eyes held a determination that both frightened and exhilarated her. "Your research could change minds. Or confirm their worst fears about me," she countered. The ship's alert system interrupted them, the nebula's radiation affecting their systems. Reality intruded once more, reminding them that passion alone couldn't shield them from the consequences of their choices. Beyond boundaries. 3 months later, Nira stood before the viewport of the trading station Nexus Point. watching vessels from a dozen worlds dock and depart in carefully choreographed patterns. Her purple skin was partially concealed by a hooded cloak, necessary camouflage in a place frequented by occasional Lysarian merchants. "Any sign of your contact?" Dash asked, joining her by the window. His guild uniform had been replaced by nondescript trader's attire, his once clean appearance now deliberately weathered. "Not yet." She scanned the crowds below. "Professor Length takes precautions, if he's coming at all." Since their escape, they'd moved constantly between remote outposts and trading hubs, always one step ahead of both Lysarian patrols and guild inquiries. Dash had officially been declared missing, presumed dead, a fiction that provided temporary safety. Naira had spent these months compiling her research, adding new observations based on their growing relationship. If Professor Length, her former mentor and the only Lysarian who had shown sympathy for her theories, agreed to meet, it might represent their first real chance to challenge the exile order. "He'll come," Dash assured her, his hand finding hers in a gesture that had become natural between them. "Your work is too important." She offered a small smile. "To science, perhaps. To Lysarian authorities, it remains heresy." Their conversation was interrupted by a subtle alert from Nira's communicator, a single pulse indicating arrival. Her body tensed with anticipation and fear. "That's him," she whispered. "Lower docking bay. Alone, as promised." The elderly Lysarian waiting in the shadowed corner of the bay showed no outward reaction as they approached, but Naira sensed his surprise at seeing her with a human, living proof of her controversial theories. "6 years of silence," Professor Length said by way of greeting. "And now you risk everything for this meeting. It must be significant." Naira straightened her posture, falling into the formal mannerisms of Lysarian academic discourse. "Professor Length, I present completed research on interspecies emotional resonance, with documented evidence of sustained telepathic equivalent bonding between Lysarian and human neurological systems." The professor's eyes shifted briefly to Dash. "I see your research has become experiential." "The most compelling science often is," she replied without apology. The conversation that followed was technical and intense, Naira presenting data while Length questioned methodologies and conclusions. Dash watched the exchange with patient attention, occasionally offering perspectives that highlighted the human experience of their connection. Finally, Length sat back. "The Symposium of Xenological Sciences meets in 2 cycles. Your findings, if presented properly, could force reconsideration of current policy." Hope flickered in Naira's eyes. "You would sponsor such a presentation?" "At considerable personal risk," Length confirmed, "but scientific truth demands courage from its advocates." He handed her a data crystal. "Coordinates and access codes. The choice to appear must be yours. And his." After Length departed, Naira and Dash returned to their ship, the crystal's weight heavy with possibility. "It could be a trap," Dash suggested as they entered orbit. "Lure you back to Lysarian space for easier capture." "Length wouldn't betray me," Naira countered. "But yes, others might intercept the communication." She studied the crystal. "If I go, the best outcome is academic debate and possible policy revision, years of bureaucratic process. And the worst? Immediate arrest. Separation." Her voice faltered. "Your detention or worse." Dash programmed a course away from the station, buying time for decision. As stars streaked past their viewport, he voiced the question that had lingered between them. "Is returning to Lysaria what you truly want? After everything?" Naira considered the question carefully, 6 years of exile and 3 months of freedom balancing in her mind. "I wanted reinstatement, validation, the return of what was taken from me." She met his gaze. "But what I have now, what we've found, it's proof of something greater than academic theory." "Meaning?" "That connection exists beyond the boundaries we create to separate ourselves." Her hand covered his on the controls. My people need to understand this, but perhaps a scholarly paper isn't the most powerful demonstration. Understanding dawned in Dash's expression. What are you suggesting? That we stop running? Not by returning to Luceria or your guild, but by creating something new. Determination sharpened her features. There are others like us, beings who cross boundaries, who form connections their societies reject. My research could help them. A sanctuary, Dash suggested, the idea taking shape between them. A place where your science serves those who need it most. Naira felt a weight lifting, the burden of seeking approval from those who had rejected her. We'd need resources, location, protection. I know people, Dash grinned. Cartographers map more than just physical space. We find the gaps where authorities don't look. As their ship accelerated toward open space, Nira initiated a transmission to Professor Length. Not acceptance of his offer, but an alternative proposal. Her research wouldn't gather dust in academic archives. It would live in practical application, helping others forge connections across biological and cultural divides. Later, as distant galaxies spiraled across their view screen, Naira and Dash lay together in the quiet darkness of their cabin. Her purple skin glowed faintly against his, physical evidence of emotional resonance that no Lysarian could deny. Are you certain? Dash asked, tracing the markings along her temple with tender familiarity. Building this sanctuary means never going home. Naira considered the stars outside, thinking of all they had experienced since that fateful crash landing. Home isn't where you're from, she said softly. It's where you're understood. His arms tightened around her as the ship carried them toward uncertainty. Whatever challenges awaited, political, scientific, or personal, they would face them, not as human and Lysarian, not as cartographer and scientist, but as two beings who had discovered the most profound truth in the galaxy. That love, like light, recognizes no boundaries, transcending distance and difference to illuminate even the darkest void. In defying the limitations others had imposed, they had found something neither had believed possible. Not just forbidden passion, but a purpose greater than themselves. And as their ship vanished into the endless expanse, they carried with them the promise that others would follow, drawn not by academic papers or political manifestos, but by the simple, powerful example of two souls who had crossed the stars to find each other.